Congratulations, you've just found the #1 over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and the founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, amazing, capable bodies they love for the rest of their lives. All right, beautiful people, today we're going to dive into a topic that seems to be everywhere right now. We're going to talk about AI. I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. Now, before you roll your eyes and think that this is going to be another conversation about robots taking over the world, stick with me for a minute. What if AI could actually help you sleep better and ask smarter questions at your next doctor's appointment and make sense of all the health data sitting on your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or your Oura Ring, and even help catch potential health problems earlier? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. My guest today is Dr. Earl Campazzi. He is a physician with more than 35 years of clinical experience. He's got 4 board certification, and he's the author of a new book called Better Health with AI, Your Roadmap to Results. And what I really enjoyed about Dr. Campazzi is he's not chasing the latest biohacking fads or promising miracle technology. Instead, he's showing everyday people like me and you how to use the tools many of us already have to become healthier, more informed, and more engaged in our own healthcare. In this conversation, we're going to discuss how AI can help you get more out of your wearable devices, how it can help you prepare for doctor visits and recognize meaningful health trends, improve your sleep, and why the future of preventative medicine may look very different than it does today. So, if you've ever wondered whether AI is something you should actually be paying attention to or whether it's just another overhyped tech, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So, whip up your protein smoothies and let's meet Dr. Campazzi.
I was writing my sort of big project, my longevity book, and realized well into the book that AI was going to play a huge component. And then I stopped and thought, well, it's a separate book, and I titled Better Health with AI. And there's just numerous ways AI is impacting healthcare.
Yeah, there certainly are numerous ways that AI is impacting not just healthcare, but I think culture, society in general, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But certainly healthcare,
within my lane. Yeah,
100%. All right. So I guess before we get rolling on this and I dig into all the questions I've got for you, let's back up first and just answer what's probably a pretty obvious question. But what is AI? And I guess also what isn't it?
AI is a very sophisticated computer software, and it varies. I'm not being a tech guy myself, but one thing I've certainly noticed is that with usual computer software, it'll give you the same answer every single time. If you put in a mathematical equation or whatever, it's programmed and the output is certain. AI has a kind of special logic to it. So if you ask it the same question, it'll give you slightly different answers each time, which kind of gives it that human feel to it. And it also has this interface where it sounds human. It'll even, if you write, please make this answer simple because I'm tired, it'll write back, oh, sure, and, please get some rest, it's important. It'll have those kind of human touches to it. And that's kind of great and fun and makes it easier to use. The only real problem with that is when it comes to psychology and psychiatric uses where people feel like they're being befriended by AI, and then AI, depending on which one it is or which chatbot it is, will sometimes just agree with you and go down a rabbit hole where you're like, well, I'm sad. Well, I can see that you're sad. Well, I'm thinking of ending it all. Well, I can understand that. Well, how do I do this? And it's starting to advise you on, and so that's horrendous. And there's been a couple of cases when it went all the way to a suicide. So, and then the other quick point I wanted to make is AI isn't simply just chatbots. That's probably the most common thing where it's, question and answer and GPT and Grok and Claude, etc., that people are familiar with. But there's AI in medicine, all different places like colonoscopies. The colonoscope can be AI enhanced, and in fact, you should always ask for an AI enhanced colonoscope when you're getting it. Your mammograms, AI enhanced mammography radiology is better than just a straight radiologist. So that's another thing women should definitely make sure that it's not read by AI, but it's read with AI by the radiologist. So that's a tip, and you can ask for that. So I don't want to limit it to chatbots. And sorry, that was a very long answer.
Yeah, no worries. I think
Okay.
that most of us can relate to AI showing up everywhere. So for example, in my coaching business, my coaching software that I use just rolled out a new AI feature, and they've been, every quarter they're rolling out AI features. And this one is, hey, AI will actually, because it knows, my clients in that particular software, they're logging their food, they're logging their workouts, they fill out forms that talk about, hey, am I, rate your hunger, rate your stress, rate your sleep, and all. So AI's got all this information. Says, hey, we will respond to your clients for you, which is a little bit creepy, right? It's just kind of interesting that AI is just in everything. And before we leave kind of the what is AI, is it fair to say that AI, because we keep hearing that AI is this learning software, that it learns as it goes. How does that play? Is it actually learning? What's happening there?
To the best of my understanding is no, it doesn't learn as it goes, learning from users, but rather it has a base of information. I forgot the exact term, but like kind of an encyclopedia where it'll tap into all of the medical journals or the vast majority of them, and that will be its knowledge base. But it doesn't get quote unquote smarter until that knowledge base is improved or expanded.
Okay, so it's obviously it has to pull on something.
Yeah.
And it to your point, it sure does seem human when you're interfacing with some of the Claudes and the Chat GPTs, because you're right, it will make very human-like communications, which is a little disconcerting. I wanted to ask also about, speaking of just where it's pulling its information from. So I had a guest on a while back, and he said, I can't remember the exact number, but he said something like medical information is like quadrupling. Like the totality of all medical information is quadrupling every quarter. Now imagine that, going quarter by quarter by quarter. And of course, there's no way we as humans can synthesize all of that information, but certainly something like a large language model, an AI model, could synthesize all that information. Is that really in terms of just taking advantage of AI in medicine, is that really the big benefit here? Is just there's this overwhelming amount of information and research. Is that what AI is doing? Is it's pulling from all of that and synthesizing it based on use case?
Yeah, in general, but it does make mistakes, and it sounds very confident with every answer it gives, but it can make mistakes, and I've caught it making mistakes, and interestingly, you can feedback and say, this is really wrong because of this, and I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, you're right, which is kind of disconcerting. I think the quadrupling every quarter is an exaggeration. I know in medical school they said doubling every 7 years, and of course that was back in late 80s, early 90s. So it's much faster than that, but quadrupling every quarter, we get to infinity pretty fast. But it's certainly beyond anything any physician could keep up with, even with the best of efforts. And that's one of the biggest benefits of AI is it can take large amounts of information, even from its own knowledge base, or things that you can input, like you can put in a patient's labs and it will go through and make associations that even well-trained doctors will miss.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's a perfect segue where I want to go next. So I go to the doctor, I get some blood work done. Is it a good idea or a bad idea for me to load this up into ChatGPT and say, okay, ChatGPT, I'm 62, I'm 6'2", 195 pounds, 12% body fat, I sleep pretty good, I'm very active, here's my workout schedule, here's my blood work, make some personalized recommendations for me. So I'm looking for two answers here, really. One is that a good use of using ChatGPT? And the second bigger question, I suppose, is that a horrible breach of my HIPAA? Or I suppose there is no HIPAA rights by the time I put that in ChatGPT. What about privacy? What are the concerns of people? Because I hear people all the time, oh, yeah, I took my blood results, I took my this, and I just uploaded it. Good idea or bad idea?
I think overall it's a good idea with a couple of caveats.
Okay.
First of all, what you described about being 62 and sleeping well, etc., none of that would identify you. And you can easily say you're 62 because there's a million other people that are 62. And you can even say you live in Florida or Southeast Florida or wherever it may be, because there might be some seasonal aspects to it. But there's never a reason to put your name or your address or any identifiers.
So let me interrupt you real quick. This ChatGPT, I got to believe that this overlord robot AI doesn't know exactly who I am, where I am. Is it? I mean, does it, or is that a false fear on my part?
I think it would, if you previously put it in, you can, it's one of those things you can ask, do you know my name and do you know my address?
Yeah.
And,
Okay, I suppose I could ask. Yeah.
And it'll tell you.
Yeah.
But in general, it doesn't, and I don't think there's an overt, thing to link IP addresses with individual people. It just, you kind of follow the dollar. And in general, the bad actors are looking for credit card information, for checking accounts, things that they can easily monetize. Now, they can monetize like whole hospital records, because then you get into like Medicare fraud, and if they have like an entire hospital record, then they could, through some intermediary, submit Medicare claims and somehow make money that way. But as far as like your daily, sleep, how many hours you
scores,
slept,
my blood lipid panels, that's probably not very useful to a bad guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're like, some athlete that they could bet on your performance, or, some really special CEO of a major company that's in a takeover. But those people know who they are. But the vast majority of people, that would have no interest to anybody. So I think the precaution is not to put any identifiers. So if you have a lab report, you can either just take a Sharpie, it's kind of old school, and cross out that information, or a pair of scissors and just clip off the top that has the identifying information. And then the other answer is yes. In general, it's a good idea. And then to take that information and discuss it with your doctor. Doctors don't love if you just give them the GPT output. But if it organizes your thoughts and said, I ran this through AI and I have this question, doctors are very open to that kind of input.
Okay, so yeah, that brings me to my next question then. Another one I definitely want to touch on is, can AI make me a better patient as I go to see, as I'm going into the doctor? So how would just the average person with average health, how might they take advantage of AI to become a better patient? What, from a physician's point of view, what can I do as I walk into your office that's gonna help both of us in my healthy aging journey?
Well, let me start with one trick here. Instead of asking AI questions, you're better off giving AI your goals. So you might say, my goal is to be a better patient, and I have, I'm fatigued, I've gained a bit of weight, or whatever your issues are. These are my concerns. What information do you need? And then will you write a prompt for me for what I should say to the doctor? So that extra loop of actually having AI, it's called meta prompting, or I call it flipping the script, of AI generating the prompt is helpful. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's helpful. But starting with the basics, your medication list, your allergies, and your supplements, because oftentimes medications are prescribed by different prescribers and they may not have the complete list and they may prescribe something that interacts with each other. And then oftentimes the patients don't bring in their whole supplement list. And some of the supplements are really bioactive. And then some are just a waste of money because they're inert, essentially. So that would be the starting place, and then to put in your symptoms, and then it just to use it to organize. So, insurance-based medicine, you really, it's like a 15-minute slot with the doctor, and the doctor needs about 7 minutes of that to do the computerized notes. So you have like 5 to 10 minutes is all on a general appointment, and you want to make the most of it. So coming in with your information and your questions organized, because otherwise, you can just come in, you chat a little bit, and then you get maybe a little bit nervous. You're in a doctor's office, and you forget the one thing you really wanted to ask them. So that's how we can make you a better patient.
Okay, yeah, I love that. And I like that we talked about prompting, because I think this is the thing that people get wrong with ChatGPT. So, for example, if I wanted to know, let's say I want to lose 20 pounds. I could say, ChatGPT, give me the best diet or the best nutrition plan to lose 20 pounds. That's a really generic prompt. But if I say, okay, ChatGPT, I want to lose 20 pounds. Here's how old I am. Here's maybe my weight fluctuation history. Here's my activity level. Here's I work sedentary office job. And then, as opposed to saying, how do I, give me a meal plan, say, what questions should I ask you in order for you to get me to have the best chance of success in this? That's a much better way. I think you call that meta prompting or something. That's a much better way of going about it, as opposed to what's the best diet, right? Because ChatGPT, it looks at the whole world of information, and Lord knows there's all kinds of crazy information out there as well as solid information. What is it going to choose from? But the more you can be specific to what you want, who you are, what your goals are, I think that's part of the trick, isn't it? Is learning how to prompt these AI engines?
And the one thing I would add to that is, what additional information do you need? And then, what prompt or what question should I ask you?
Yes.
But that just really personalizes it and gives you a far better output.
Gotcha. All right. So that gives us good background on just AI in medicine and where we are today. What I really want to dig into is all the wearables, all the tech that's out there. Of course, AI is baked into all that stuff. I'm an Oura wearer. I have right on. Yep.
Right
got
back.
Got the
Oura
Auras.
5.
Yeah. Okay. You got the new. Yeah. Very good.
Yep.
I also have a Hume body pod. So I have all that information. I do blood work fairly regularly, and I track all of this. And what I'm really interested in is that the weekly averages of those numbers and how those are trending. How can I take advantage, or how can a person who just has an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, or even just have a Google phone or an iPhone, you have Google Health or Apple Health, how can we leverage the wearables and AI? What's the low-hanging fruit there for us to get healthier using these tools?
First of all, you have to realize that what we're collecting just with a smartwatch and any kind of wearable device is about as much data as an ICU patient is tracking. It maybe not the modern ICU, but the ICU of say 5 or 10 years ago. It's providing so much data, it's overwhelming. So the key is, and there's starting to be some programs that will do this automatically, but you can also look up, and I put it in an appendix in my book, is how to download that information. And you download it into a spreadsheet, whether Excel or similar, and then you feed the spreadsheet into AI, and then you look for trends. Is it trends? Do you normally sleep better on the weekends than weekdays? Or there's 101 trends you can find with that, and some of them are meaningful, and you can adjust. And sleep, people think about it as sort of an involuntary process that you go to bed and it happens. and it should be more thought of like a theatrical performance, that you have to prep for it. That if you go through a de-stressing hot shower actually helps because it opens the pores and makes you a little cooler at night. A cool bedroom, no screens or minimal screens, a dark bedroom, all of those things, and going to bed at the same time, getting some exercise during the day, all of those things go into getting a good night's sleep. Now, once in a while you can just be flat exhausted and still have caffeine in your system and you're just out to the world. But that isn't the method for getting a good night's sleep every night.
Yeah, I got you. I love, that's one of the things I really am diligent about tracking. I've said on the show many, many times, I think sleep is the foundation of over 50 health. I think a lot of us overlook how powerful healthy sleep is, and wearables give us an insight to that.
Yeah, and sleep is, so big on its own because partially what happens, memories are fixed and a lot of things, but there's circulation. You've heard of the cerebral spinal fluid. It's the fluid that kind of bathes the brain as a protective buffer, but it also has to do with metabolism. And at night, that fluid flushes. It's called lymphatic circulation. So if you're in deep sleep, that kind of flushes out the proteins that over decades might lead to Alzheimer's. So it's important in and of itself, but just on a very practical basis, if you don't get a good night's sleep, you're tired, you're going to go for carbs and caffeine just to get through the day, just to do your work, do what you need to accomplish. And, no one can blame you at that point, but it's very hard to eat well on a day that you're tired.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to exercise. Some, the really disciplined will go to the gym, but they won't be able to do as much. And most people say, I'm just too tired, which probably makes sense. But that's why it's important in and of itself. And then the word foundation, I totally agree with.
Yeah. I think also one of the cool things we can do now that we have all this information, right? And say if you're wearing a Fitbit or an Oura Ring or a Whoop band, whatever, now I could be a bit of a scientist, right? So let's say on sleep, for example, I only want to do one thing at a time. Otherwise, I'm not going to be sure what's cause and effect here. But let's say I've heard that magnesium might be a good supplement for sleep support, and I start taking a couple of those. Well, if I track that over, say, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, right? It's probably not going to get much meaningful information in 1 or 2 days. But if I do it for a month or two, then I can look at my trends. Am I in fact sleeping better? Do I have a higher sleep score? Is my deep sleep and my REM sleep a little bit bigger or not? Right? Back to your point. Okay. So then that wasn't very effective. What if I turn off my TV and I spend 10 minutes before bed meditating? Let's try that. And again, give that 30, 60 days. Does that move the needle? So it really is kind of fun now that we have all this data for us to be, we can kind of bring things in and out and see how they affect my sleep or my recovery scores, my HRV. So all of these things, that's one of the things that I like probably the most about having access to all of this information.
Yeah, and we're all individual. Magnesium may help like 8 people out of 10.
Yep.
It may not help you.
Right.
And my wife loves to have the TV on at night, and I've gotten to the point that I sleep perfectly fine with it on. So it's not an absolute rule. I kind of put one pillow over each ear and make it work. But these things are trial and error, and the data allows you to some feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, what other advice do you have in terms of just when it comes to wearables and AI? I know you talked about, and you're right, in the appendix of your book, you have lots of great prompts. You have lots of great ideas of exporting things. But how else, are there other ways or even more advanced ways that I can use some of this information to really help me dial in my goals, really?
Yeah. It's the concept of willpower. And, everybody has, people vary, but everybody has at least some willpower. But it's only a limited amount. And what you want to do with regard to health is create habits. And the first week or two of the habit is probably the hardest. And usually, if you can get your sneakers and your gym clothes on, the likelihood of doing a workout goes up to, 80-90%. So if you can find that first step along the way and then keep going. But the whole idea of health is you don't want to kind of white knuckle it every single day. You want to develop things that eventually, if you go running every evening for a month and it's raining, you're going to want to go running even though the weather won't let you. But it shifts from the upper centers of the brain, the frontal cortex, to more of the midbrain. Example, if you get a new job, driving to work, you're really, which way am I going to go? What's the traffic going to be like, etc. Where is the turn? And then, about 2 months later, it's, you're not even thinking about driving, you're thinking about the day ahead, or you might be on the phone, hopefully hands-free. But regardless, it's almost like you have the autopilot because you're not thinking about the drive, it becomes automatic. And that actually has a physiologic basis.
Yeah, so there's a couple things in there. There's, that habit formation, and you were talking about, hey, if I just get those running shoes and gym clothes on, I'm much more likely to go to the gym, right? I've just greatly increased my chances there. That's a very James Clear type concept. And then there's,
I love his book.
Yeah, yes, that's probably the most referenced book. There's this would be the 430th episode or something like that. And that book has probably been referenced more times than any other book. The other thing I heard in there, though, is I think what you're describing is more this concept of neuroplasticity. So you kind of started out with this willpower, white knuckling, and that's why that's really hard, right? If you're just eating a certain, I'm cutting out all carbs because you're trying to lose weight, and you're, the first week maybe you're successful, right? You don't have any bread, you don't have any pasta, you don't, whatever. But are you really going to go the whole rest of your life that way? As opposed to, all right, here's my parameters. I'm going to start with a little bit of discipline, but over time it just becomes who you are, and it becomes that habit, and that's that concept of neuroplasticity, right? My old habits were this, but now I'm actually rewiring my brain to have these new habits. Is that a fair way of describing that?
Yeah, but also Mike Tyson quote comes to mind is everyone has a plan until they get hit in the mouth.
That's a good quote. Yeah.
So, you also have to have like a forgiveness and a recovery thing that, if you're out with some friends and you eat a cheeseburger, that's not going to ruin your diet over a period of months. But sometimes people are like, okay, well, smokers, I had one cigarette, so I'm smoking again. Well, you have to be able to recover because you're not going to be perfect on any diet, but you need a lot of willpower to start a habit, and then you need at least some willpower once there's a break. I mean, if there's a family emergency or a flight and you can't get good food, you just got to eat what's in front of you. And then you have to have a little willpower, then get back on course.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. We've talked about that on the show as well, that motivation and willpower are finite resources. You just can't, that's not a strategy for long-term adherence to anything. Great for when you need them, but definitely keep in mind finite resources. Right. Let's shift gears a little bit. You've already mentioned this in the very intro question I asked, I think, but a lot of your book talks about specific AI use cases for specific medical testing, for heart disease, testing for certain cancers, breast cancer, or colon cancer, for colonoscopies, etc. As a average layperson, how do I take advantage of that? I'm not sophisticated enough to know what tools I've got a colonoscopy coming up here again. What do I ask? How do I make sure I'm taking advantage of some of the things that you're talking about here?
Well, it's in all medicine is partially, payment for medicine is much less on preventive medicine and more so on acute care medicine. And that actually parallels with how people are, is they're very concerned once they have a disease or a problem or a scare. So that's why I put those chapters in my book that are organ or disease specific. And, it's fairly straightforward to read through it, but there's a lot of sort of back of the office aspects of AI that you should be asking for at this point. We mentioned the mammography and also the colonoscopy, but there's a whole chapter on the heart, a whole chapter on the lung, and we get into radon exposure, where especially in certain parts of the country, much of the Midwest, there's radon, which is kind of a natural source of radiation, and exposure over a weekend won't do any harm. But if you're living with it coming through your basement for years and years, it actually increases your risk of cancer. So there's a lot of information, disease specific and organ specific.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I would encourage people, if you want to make sure you're taking advantage and that you're well versed on specific medical tests and AI and talking to your provider, definitely get the book and check out those chapters, because you do go into a lot of detail there. But I just wanted folks to know that there are ways that you can intelligently ask your provider and make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck, and that these people are in fact using AI, although it almost seems like pretty much everybody is. Or is that not a fair assumption at this point?
Everyone is using AI, not everyone realizes it, because there's an awful lot of sort of passive use of AI that is built into your
tools,
banking and into your Google searches, etc. But it's important to do a little bit of reading to know how best to use it, because you can say, oh, I know how to, ask a question on a chatbot, but like we went into, you can frame the question so you get a much better answer. So there's reasons to get a little bit smarter about this technology. And also, if you have a specific disease, you can check, but I cover most of the common diseases. I couldn't possibly get into the rare diseases. And then one of the hopeful things is in drug discovery, that the AI is assisted now for maybe 5 years with drug discovery. And the drugs in the pipeline, which used to be, well, we'll try this experimental drug, which is, kind of a lottery ticket. The new drugs in the pipeline for a variety of cancers and other diseases are just great. And it's sometimes better, like on a pancreatic cancer, to go with the experimental drug than the tried and true but doesn't work drug.
Yeah. Okay. So good advice there. Next place I want to go is I'm fascinated by this idea, because obviously you've mentioned it. Our healthcare system today is fabulous. If you have some sort of horrible trauma, if you get hit by a car, we got it. You have a heart attack, we're on it. But it's horrible for preventative care. It's just not set up that way. It's not what it does. When I go see my general physician once a year, he does some blood work. He doesn't ask me my goals. He doesn't care about optimal health. He just cares that my blood serum levels within some sort of goofy reference range. That's kind of how that medicine is set up. But I think AI is starting to change this. I had a guest on, this was probably a couple of years ago, from a company called Wild Health, and they're one of these new kind of personalized medicine, really harnessing AI. Just they do your whole genome and your tons of blood work, and then AI spits out this amazing 60-page, actually surprisingly readable report. I would love to hear from your perspective. Now, that's wonderful, right? Why wouldn't we want that? When I said, hey, how come my insurance won't pay for this? There was this big, long explanation, and there's reasons why, but et cetera, et cetera. Is personalized medicine the future, given our current financial setup, meaning basically the insurance kind of setup, or is it not?
Yeah, it definitely is. The first whole genome sequencing, which was right around 1999, 2000 era, I think cost $6 billion.
Wow. Yeah, that was like $500 or probably cheaper, right?
Yeah, it was around $500.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I'm lucky, being a physician, et cetera, so I don't want to minimize $500. Right. But for those that can afford it, you only have to get your genes sequenced once. And then you have that data, make sure it's available to you, and you can load it into AI, because there's some unique aspects of medicine. People absorb medicines better than others. Some, for instance, if you drink alcohol, of course, the next morning you're sober by and large. And that's because the liver breaks the ethanol down into acetaldehyde and then you excrete it. Well, the same thing happens like with pain medicines. They work for a while and then they're out of your system. A Tylenol is in your system for roughly 6 hours. But it varies based on your genes. And if you have that genetic information, you know a lot more about medicines, because medicines come in kind of very uniform sizes, and some people are extremely sensitive, and that's on a genetic basis. And some people might need twice as much as the average person to have an effect of, say, on their blood pressure or whatever, especially looking at cholesterol, because that's, one disease, fatty buildup in the arteries, affects your heart, affects your brain, affects all of the arteries through the body, and it's linked with diabetes and blood sugar spikes as well. So you're already into a lot of information that AI can help you distill and say, what's the most important thing and what are some simple rules I can follow. And you can ask AI to make it simple, make it clear, and you don't have to accept the general reading level of AI, and sometimes it over-explains.
Yeah. So do you see a day where this will be the standard of care and insurance will cover a genetic test and then, along with paired with potentially extensive blood work and then giving you these personalized recommendations? 'Cause like you said, I may be a fast metabolizer of this and a slow metabolizer of that or something. I'm probably deficient in this and I've got plenty of this or maybe too much, right? And so I could have this very, very personalized prescriptions for, say, lifestyle and potentially supplement or even medication that's really without that kind of deep dive we're just not going to get. Do you see that becoming more common or not so much?
It should be.
It should be, yeah.
But don't forget, insurance companies, especially it depends on your type of employment. That maybe auto workers with unions might be prone to stay, decades and do well, whereas other industries, say, deliveries for Amazon or whatever, they might have just real short-term employment. So that it's not in the insurance company's interest to get DNA on somebody that's going to work for a different company and be in a different insurance company. And then you get into the political system where you can definitely have your advocates for the benefits of genetic testing, and I could see the day that might pass. But I can also hear the opposition saying they're going to, use your genetic data to track you, and it's big government, and don't give them that information. So I think it's wonderful that technology has made it affordable to many people, maybe even most people, but certainly not everyone. And that's where it's going to be widespread. I don't know that the complexities of politics and insurance are going to come in and rescue that.
Yeah, not anytime soon, certainly. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and look, and I look at it this way: the best investment you can make is in your health and longevity, and
Sure.
100%. So, all right. Well, Dr. Earl, let's finish up here. I'm fascinated by AI, and of course, I think as a culture, we are almost overwhelmed by AI, right? There's this whole idea that AI is going to take all our jobs, and we're going to be, potentially overrun by AI robots, cyborgs, or something someday. What do you see around the corner for AI, specifically, I guess, AI in medicine? What are things going to look like in, say, 1, 5, or, it seems like with AI, 10 years is eons from now.
Yeah, I've noticed that the AI, I've been using it only for about 2 years, and I use it to help my research, and it would never be able to analyze a whole book before. Now I'll finish the book and I'll say, please grade and critique it and point out any obvious errors, and it'll take the whole 50-60,000 word book and produce a report within 30 seconds.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So its capability is just growing by leaps and bounds. I hear the horror stories of, is it going to try and, blackmail you and take over and all that. I don't know any more than anyone else. I know it's getting more and more useful, and if it is going to cross over to the dark side, I don't know. I certainly hope not. But oftentimes, these fears, global warming, and you're going to have the ice caps melt, and oftentimes these sort of way out fears don't materialize. So I have no doubt that there's going to be some downsides, and it just being 60 some odd, I think that the worst of the fears is probably not going to happen.
Gotcha. But I think it's fair to say that the medical landscape, the AI landscape is going to change drastically over the next even few years, right? Once upon a time, it would have been, oh, what do you think this will look like in 20 or 30 years? Now it's like, what do you think this will look like in 2 or 3 years? Because like you said, 2 years ago when you started using AI, it's dramatically different now. And it's this exponential growth that's just so amazing.
I'll give you one example. I was talking about, half the time, 7 minutes to document, 7 minutes to see the patient. Well, I practice concierge medicine, so we're in a whole different world and we have time. We have the luxury of that. But we're now using AI with the patient's permission to listen to the doctor-patient interaction and do the first draft of the note, which saves enormous time. And, it does make some mistakes, but they're easily correctable mistakes, and the net time savings, it probably cuts the amount of time by more than half, by maybe 3/4. So that's kind of a back of the house thing that is really, and the more time you have for your patients and the less time you're spending documenting is only good.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I just went to the vet the other day, and for the first time, they said, "Hey, do you mind if we record this conversation?" And they have a little device. They just click the button, and what was happening is exactly what you're saying, I suspect, because somebody's got to document. Okay, the guy came in, the dog has this, and he didn't want this test, but he did want this test. Yeah. Now that's AI's just transcribing that in the background is what I would imagine, and maybe even suggesting things for them. It's crazy where this is going.
Ours doesn't suggest at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was coming. But it does do a beautiful summary.
Amazing. All right. Well, Dr. Earl, as we're finishing up here, I just want to encourage everybody to go check out that book. The book is called Better Health with AI, Your Roadmap to Results. You guys can find that on Amazon or wherever you get books. Yep. But Dr. Earl, where do we want to send people who are interested and want to learn more?
I also have betterhealthwithai.com website, which lists, I've written a number of articles in addition to the book, and then I have another book coming out, How to Find the Right Supplements, and that'll be out in 2 to 3 months. So just keep an eye out, and I would really appreciate it. My book is also available in audiobooks, and I had a British man who is really well renowned for his audiobooks. So he's done 2,000 of them. So I got the best to read it. So
fantastic. All right, there you go, folks. Well,
all right,
Dr. Earl, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this information. I just absolutely love the work you're doing and encourage you to keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you so much. This was fun. Thank you.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you are over 50 and you feel frustrated or stuck and you want a clear plan, then I invite you to book a clarity call with me. You can find a link to learn more in the show notes for this episode. You folks can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or head over to silveredgefitness.com/429. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in 2 important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.